Dr. William McCrea.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I beg to move the motion standing in the name of my right honourable and honourable friends and myself. It's on the order paper today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for years the subject that we're discussing has been swept under the carpet. I believe it deserves a mature and thoughtful debate. Suicide is a very significant problem in our society. It impacts and is often sudden and shocking. And whilst we can to some degree prepare ourselves for the death of elderly parents through ageing or the loss of loved ones through chronic illness, suicide catches us by surprise. Often there is no warning, and we are left with a feeling of utter bewilderment as to what has happened. We ask the question, was it preventable? Were there warning signs that we failed to recognise? Was it simply a cry for help that went wrong? All of these are questions to which we will regretfully never receive an answer. It can be seen that suicide touches the lives of many people and is in every case a tragedy, both for the life that has ended and also for the family, friends and community that is left behind. We must always remember that each person who has been lost to suicide has been someone's child, someone's parent, brother, sister or friend, and their passing leaves a wound that does not easily heal, even with the passing of time. In addition, those bereaved by suicide have special needs and require special support, for bereavement by suicide is itself a risk factor for suicide. We cannot afford to ignore or be complacent about the prevalence of suicide and self-harm in this United Kingdom. Preventing suicide today presents a serious socio-economic issue as well as a political challenge, and is a problem that we all have a duty to address. There is a great need to change public attitudes, increase awareness and understanding about suicide as a major public health problem that is largely preventable. Every year, almost 1 million people die from suicide globally, and in the last 45 years, suicide rates have increased by 60% worldwide. Suicide is one of the 3 leading causes of death among those aged 15 to 44 years in many countries. And although suicide rates has traditionally been highest among the male elderly, rates among young people have been increasing to such an extent that they are now the group at highest risk in a third of countries worldwide. In 2011, 289 deaths by suicide were recorded in Northern Ireland, with the male suicide rate approximately 3 times greater than that of female. Although this... Sorry, I'm happy to give way.
Gentleman for giving way, and I congratulate him and his party for bringing forward this incredibly important debate onto the floor of the House this afternoon. Does he not agree with me that one of the more worrying statistics the Honourable Gentleman references male suicide is that people who are coming out of prison in those first 2 weeks of exiting prison are actually incredibly highly at risk of committing suicide? And does he not agree with me that we should be making sure that we make better use of the community and healthcare pathways to ensure that we can prevent and protect people who are very vulnerable, like those coming out of prison?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I wholeheartedly agree with the Honourable Lady's representation, and I do believe it is important that we do use the pathway, and it is also vitally important that every effort is made to ensure that persons who are at a vulnerable moment in their lives, which the Honourable Lady is talking about, certainly receives the best possible help given, and I will develop that, I trust, in the rest of as I further go into this debate. Yes, I'm happy to give way.
On top of those who leave prison and are very vulnerable to suicidal tendencies, would the member not also agree that one of the highest groups at risk are young males who have got involved in the drug culture? And does he not find it rather odd that, given that statistic, there are those who are still campaigning to actually have drug use made legal.
Absolutely.
I'd like to thank my honourable friend for his statement, and indeed that is very true, and I wholeheartedly agree with what he has said, and I would also seek to develop some of this as I continue my speech. Although the figures which I gave a moment ago is a welcome reduction on the highest ever recorded figure of 313 suicide deaths in Northern Ireland in 2010, Northern Ireland continues to experience higher rates of suicide among adolescents and young adults, particularly young men, than any other part of the United Kingdom. Deliberate self-harm is also a significant problem, with a growing number of cases being seen in hospital accident emergency departments. Statistics from the Department of Health, Social Services and Public Safety suggest that almost 500 patients presented at a hospital emergency department in Belfast with deliberate self-harm over a 3-month period from April to June 2012, with many more instances never coming to the attention of the health services at all. In 2011, the highest rate of registered suicides were recorded in the parliamentary constituencies of West Belfast and North Belfast. In my own constituency of South Antrim, 18 lives were lost to suicide, 16 of them males.
Will the honourable member give way?
Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Is he aware of an international study that has highlighted the fact that Northern Ireland has the highest instances of post-conflict trauma of any post-conflict region across the globe, and that this contributes to the high level of suicide, and it's evidenced by the fact that much of this is concentrated in parts of Northern Ireland where the conflict was at its fiercest. This is added to by the fact that many of the people suffering trauma served in the armed forces, and what we really need in Northern Ireland now, under the military covenant, is a specialist centre for the treatment of trauma for those who have served our country.
Once again, I thank my honourable friend, Mr Deputy Speaker, for his statement. And could I know that the Minister who will be replying this will certainly take the points that are being made, and I trust very seriously indeed. I did mention that in my own constituency, as said, 18 lives were lost to suicide, 16 of them males. Between January and September of last year, a total of 223 deaths by suicide have been recorded in Northern Ireland. Again, with socially deprived areas in North and West Belfast worse affected. But I have to point out that another part of the worrying statistics which we are given, that whilst it is true we must concentrate in North and West Belfast in particular, where the rate is highest. We have been seeing, not only in the urban community, but in the rural Northern Ireland, we have seen it now reaching into those areas where people feel that both isolated and indeed very vulnerable to the thoughts of suicide. And that is a very worrying thing for myself as well. Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I thank the honourable gentleman for giving way. Does the honourable gentleman have any idea whether there is any link to membership in the past of illegal organisations, and those that were inclined to carry out violence may well actually retrospectively be so depressed by that that they take their own lives?
I thank the honourable gentleman for his interjection. Can I say that once again I hope to touch on that. I do believe that there is that must be taken into consideration, because I certainly know that the guilt factor, many people who have been involved in activities perhaps that they were drawn into, and unfortunately they live with the consequences for the rest of their lives. The guilt factor can be one of the leading factors which will push them towards suicide. The Bamford Review report on mental health promotion, published in Northern Ireland in May 2006, reinforced the need to prevent suicide. The report found that in the 25 years from 1969 to 1994, more people died by suicide than as a result of the troubles in our province. Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Honourable gentleman in giving way, and again I want to congratulate him and his party for bringing this important debate to the floor of the House. He talks about the factors linked to suicide. would you also accept that a key factor linked to suicide is in relation to mental health issues? And on that basis, what we have to do, and everyone here, members of Parliament and outside, we have to take away that stigma related to mental illness so people can actually step forward and ask for that help, which they badly need.
Deputy Speaker, I certainly wholeheartedly agree with those remarks, and I do believe that the Bamford report did highlight the reality of the link between mental health, and we do have to remove the stigma connected with mental health. We do have also to remove the stigma to suicide, because many families are deeply hurt by that stigma, and I'm happy to give way to my own member, and I will certainly give way to them, gentlemen.
I do thank the honourable member for giving way. Is the honourable member aware of research carried out by Lewis Appleby, who is now the suicide czar, that showed that in fact 75% of those who suicide have had no connection with mental health services, and that it is very dangerous to focus suicide help and support only in mental health teams. It is a risk that we actually fail to protect many of those who need our help.
Dr. William.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Lady, first of all, for her interest, because she certainly has been seeking and endeavouring to highlight this issue in one of the committee rooms upstairs, and that is very commendable, and I thank her for that. But I wholeheartedly agree, and I will give, because there is no one reason for a person coming to that place where they feel that the only way out is suicide, and therefore I think there are many, and I will touch on some of those again, but I'm happy to give way to them, gentlemen.
I think the gentleman realises how much appreciated his colleague's choice of this subject is today, and I thank him for his generosity in taking on it. I do declare two interests. I'm a joint president of one of the Samaritan branches through family links in the past, and I'm involved with an organisation, charity called Papyrus, which is campaigning to prevent suicide amongst young people in the UK. Can I just accentuate what he said? It may be often in rural areas as much as urban areas that people feel depressed, and there can be no presumption as to the reason. Teenagers can be very depressed because of medication. I've had family experience of that. Young university students because of the pressure of their studies and relationships. It can be for anybody at any time, and therefore organisations like the Samaritans and like Papyrus ought to be known abroad so that anybody has access on the phone to reach them.
Speaker, I really do wholeheartedly agree with what the Red Honourable Gentleman is saying, because I really do believe that whilst there are agencies there available for help, one of the things I've found out, and I'll come to that in my speech, is the lack of knowledge within the community that availability of help is there. I think we have got to, we as leaders within the community have got to be willing to say, listen, this is not a taboo subject. This is not something that we can talk about. The community, the country needs to be willing to open up to this. As we say to many young people, you need to open up when you have a burden, when you have a problem, when you have this isolation, you need to be willing to open up. I think we as legislators need to be willing to open up as well, and not run away from this issue, not run away and say, listen, it's something to be hidden or pushed away to the side. But let us, and I'm delighted that my right honourable and honourable friends, and I know I have the support from across the political spectrum in Northern Ireland in bringing this before the House. I really do feel that this is a problem right across the United Kingdom. As I pointed out at the very beginning, 1 million people across the world in a year came to the point where they took their own lives. Now the fact is that is serious. That is very serious, and we are not immune from that. Not one part or region of the United Kingdom is immune from this. And I can assure you, not one family is immune from this, because it can touch every family from whatever, no matter how rich, no matter how poor, those families can experience the very same pain and the very same hurt that I am expressing, that has been expressed to me, and that is why we're bringing forth this debate today. But the report also found that on average since 2000, deaths due to suicide have exceeded deaths on the roads. and concluded that suicidal behaviour places a heavy human and financial burden on society in Northern Ireland at an annual cost to the economy of 170 million, owing to work days lost and hospital admissions due to attempted suicides and suicidal behaviour. Research undertaken by Mike Tomlinson of Queen's University in 2007 also found that the Northern Ireland suicide rate has been growing since the mid-90s, which was attributed to younger people, particularly men, taking their own lives. Now, Tomlinson found out... Yes, I'm happy to go away.
To the honourable gentleman giving way, he talks about young people. Does he know if there have been any discussions between the developed nations in relation to preventing young people from accessing suicide websites? Because I think it's absolutely crucial that that prevention work takes place.
Certainly, once again, Mr Deputy Speaker, I am deeply appreciative of the intervention of the honourable gentleman, and I wholeheartedly agree with his remarks, and once again we will endeavour to take that point as we go on in this debate. Now, Tomlinson found out that about 150 suicides were recorded annually between 2000 and 2004, but by 2006 that figure had risen to 291. He argued that the end of the conflict in Northern Ireland may have brought its own problems. Figures released by the Office of National Statistics show that in 2011 there were 6,045 suicides in people aged 15 and over in the United Kingdom, an increase of 437 compared to 2010. The UK's suicide rate increased significantly between 2010 and 11, from 11.1 to 11.8 deaths per 100,000 population. This trend was further reflected in Wales, which recorded 341 suicides, its highest rate since 2004, and Scotland also saw an increase from 781 deaths by suicide in 2010 to 889 deaths in 2011.
Would the honourable gentleman give way?
Yes, I'm happy to give way.
Thank the honourable gentleman for giving way and for setting the scene very clearly for us all in this chamber. The suicide rates that's shown over the last few years that the honourable gentleman has indicated would cover the period of the economic downturn that there's been. Does the honourable gentleman feel that perhaps maybe at this time especially there's a greater focus, or there should be a greater focus upon suicide across the whole of the United Kingdom for the very reason of the economy and the downturn in jobs?
Once again, I thank Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank my colleague for his statement, and whilst it is true that I have given a lot of statistics, and I'll come on to perhaps some of the causes in a moment, whilst I have given a lot of statistics, and those can be very cold things, but I want to draw the attention simply this House today very earnestly and genuinely that behind every one of these statistics is a personal tragedy. A personal tragedy that a person came to the point where they felt there was no other way to go. A personal tragedy, understand the loneliness or the desperation a person feels that they're trapped in whenever they come to the point when they contemplate that the only way out is suicide. There's no one reason as to why people take their own lives. It is often a result of problems building up to the point where the person can see no other way out of coping with what they are experiencing. Factors that have been linked with suicide are unemployment, economic decline, personal debt, painful and disabling illness, heavy use of or dependency on alcohol or other drugs. Children and adults are dealing with the impact of family breakdowns, the loss or breakup of a close relationship, depression, social isolation, bullying, or poor educational attainment on a daily basis. These experiences have been shown to make people more susceptible to suicide, and it may be that a seemingly minor event is the trigger for them attempting to take their own life. Not to die on many occasions, but simply to get relief from their unbearable pain. Low self-esteem, being close to tears, not being able to cope with small everyday events are all, Mr Deputy Speaker, in my opinion, all signs that someone is struggling to cope with overwhelming feelings. Yet it is often very difficult to tell if someone is suicidal or depressed, as people in crisis react in different ways, and uncharacteristic behaviour can often be a sign that there is something very wrong. One of the main problems that I want to make during this debate today is, where do people turn for support and help? I want firstly to acknowledge the work that is carried out by our frontline health and social care professionals and the effort that has gone into the development and delivery of suicide prevention strategies, which aim to identify regional risk factors, establish key objectives via a cross-section of organisations, and seek ultimately to reduce rates of suicide and self-harm throughout the United Kingdom. For example, in Northern Ireland, I appreciate a ministerial coordination group within the Northern Ireland Assembly. It was established in 2006 to ensure that suicide prevention is a priority across relevant government departments, and to enhance cross-departmental cooperation on the issue. I was delighted that Minister Poots changed that group meeting from a needs basis to regularly meeting to provide the sustained effort and leadership needed to reduce the high rate of suicide in Northern Ireland. And I could recommend him for the long-term upstream intervention approach to the problem. However, in addition to government-led initiatives in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, credit also must be given to those agencies, voluntary organisations, working at the heart of our communities to provide a vital lifeline when one is most needed. I acknowledge the excellent work done by many church organisations that give spiritual counselling to many who feel life is so burdensome that it is not worth the struggle. Also, these organisations, whether they be government agencies or voluntary agencies, church agencies, they have a vital role to play in complementing local mental and public health services. And this work at the coalface is truly inspirational. And I pay tribute to those men and women who dedicate so much of their lives to helping others. I did say earlier on, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that people need to know the availability of those who are willing to help. And I say that because just about 3 weeks ago there was a conference held in my own constituency, not called by politicians, called by a community in Antrim after 2 suicides had taken place. And there was therefore this desire within the community to do something. So they called people together. I was delighted and honoured to be a part of that occasion. But what I found out that day was this: there was a multitude of organisations that actually cross the problem or deal with the problem. But the reality is that many within the community don't know about them. Many do not know where the help can be got at the moment it is needed. Now, of course, over the past year, I've had the pleasure of working closely with my honourable friends, colleagues there with PIPS in North Belfast, the Public Initiative for Prevention of Suicide and Self-Harm, a not-for-profit organisation which has been delivering suicide prevention and awareness training since 2008. Through my association with PIPS, I've come to understand how they believe that with local people trained to be more aware of the risk of suicide and the sources of help available, our communities will be safer, more people will be saved from taking their own lives. Surely that's what it's all about, is prevention, rather than, unfortunately, there is no cure when suicide actually takes place. I'm happy to give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman. I'm listening very intently, and I'm just wondering whether there is anything the Northern Ireland Assembly or the government can do, for example, to have publicly funded advertisements on Northern Ireland television, and also priests, when they are preaching, raising this matter and alerting the whole of their congregations to actually the problem itself. Perhaps you're coming on to that in your speech as well.
William McCrea.
Mr Deputy Speaker, once again I thank the honourable gentleman for his intervention, and I certainly will come on to that particular situation, and I certainly have endeavoured myself when I'm speaking in congregations to remind people of the loneliness that people experience when they are in that most vulnerable situation. And no one knows the depths of that valley or how dark is that night that they're walking through. And therefore there has to be a greater understanding. We can gain that understanding if people talk and express, and that's what happened in Antrim. People were expressing their own experiences. I found that it was not only helpful to them, but it was helpful to our understanding and the community's understanding to the situation. Members will also be aware that I've spoken recently in the House concerning child and adolescent internet safety following horrific reports in the media where young people have taken their own lives as a result of cyberbullying.
Will the honourable member give way?
Yes, I'm happy.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for giving way. And just before he goes further on with his comments, he referred to support groups, and I met recently with Horizons, which is a local support group in Lisburn, struggling but doing some excellent work on a voluntary basis, but struggling to get the funding they need. Many of the members themselves having had family experience of losing a loved one in these circumstances, and aren't people like that well placed because they have walked through the dark valley to provide the kind of support that's needed in our communities, and therefore greater priority for funding of such groups is essential.
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank my right honourable friend for his intervention, and could I say that in actual fact the motion does include that, calls upon the government to adequately resource and promote child and adolescent digital safety, and therefore, and also it's wider than that, but nevertheless resource is a reality. It is a problem that these organisations need help with. The internet and new media are nowadays prominent features on youth culture. Young people see the use of technology as a vital part of their social life, and the online environment has enabled unique opportunities for learning, connection and communication. Almost 99% of children aged between 8 and 17 access the internet. 90% of children aged 5 to 16 have a computer at home. Although the risks created by the internet and new media are yet to be properly assessed, there is growing concern over the use of the internet for cyberbullying and to normalise and encourage suicide and suicidal behaviour. The Byron Review, conducted in 2008 into Safer Children in a Digital World, found that there is a range of material on the internet that may present particular issues for specific groups of children and young people. This includes content or sites that promote or give information about harmful behaviour such as suicide and self-harm. The report found that while some children might be deterred from harmful behaviour by witnessing such content, or might find emotional and social support from others experiencing the same feeling, it is clear that for some children there are major risks. Sites providing information about suicide techniques, for example, could increase the chance of a suicide attempt being successful, and therefore decrease the chance of that young person will receive help. I'm happy to wait.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. The honourable member will be aware that the hosting of these sites is illegal in the United Kingdom, thanks to the Coroners and Justice Bill. Our problem is that many of these sites are hosted from outside of the United Kingdom, and actually they're not illegal outside. It would require the internet providers to block access. They move them down the access chain when you Google for them, but they cannot block the access. How do we therefore block them from getting in?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I thank the Honourable Lady for her remarks, and certainly I do intend just to touch on that was coming to the concluding part of my remarks here today. The report found that whilst... Yes, sir.
he's covering lots of bases. Can I just add one thing in this context? It seems to be one of the issues we face as a society is that lots of young people become actually very isolated from contact with other young people, other than through the internet or through texting. And actually that's a real danger zone. They retire to their bedrooms, they're not seen from one night to the next. Their communication with others and parental and family responsibility to try to make sure youngsters are out and being monitored so that people can pick up signs that might lead them to the sort of suicide sites are as important as dealing with the sites themselves.
Honourable members, in the last two interventions, we should be coming through the chair, and instead we're focusing towards the member who we all wish to hear. Reverend William McCrea.
Deputy Speaker, but I certainly like to agree with the right honourable gentleman in his intervention. I think it is a reality, and I was talking to folks just at the weekend. You know, when we talk about the isolation and where young people withdraw themselves, if you just set your mind back a few years ago, you used to see out on the street, Mr. Deputy Speaker, children playing football on the streets. You saw little girls, they were out with their prams and out on the streets. Just look at the streets today, you will find that there are very few children on the streets anymore. So where are they? They're in their rooms. They're not with their families. They're in their rooms. And therefore, the internet, on many occasions, has taken over their lives. And that will lead to the isolation which certainly has been mentioned. Where online discussions or communities emerge around harmful behaviour, there is a risk of what the Smartens describe as an echo chamber, where users reinforce each other's behaviour and negative feelings about themselves. In a communication to me, the Smartens indicated that there are some aspects of the way that individuals interact with one another online through social networking sites or online chat rooms that can place vulnerable people at risk by exposing them to detail about suicide methods or conversations that encourage suicide. Indeed, in recent years, there have been several widely reported cases of individuals taking their own lives having used websites that have provided explicit information on suicide methods or have been used to facilitate suicide pacts. Restriction of access to information about suicide methods is an established component of suicide prevention. However, this is particularly difficult to achieve online, not least because suicide-related websites hosted abroad are legal in most other countries. The Smartens have worked in partnership with major companies to develop practical initiatives to support people at risk on suicide lines. In November 2010, an initiative was launched in partnership with Google to display the Smartens helpline number and a highly visited telephone icon above normal Google search results when people in the UK use a number of search terms related to suicide. The Smartens also work closely with Facebook to allow users to get help for a friend whom they believe is struggling to cope or feeling suicidal. And we must express appreciation to the Smartens for doing this excellent work. These pioneering initiatives are to be commended, but more must be done. The Department of Health Suicide Prevention Strategy in England recognises the need to continue to support the internet industry to remove content that encourages suicide and provide ready access to suicide prevention services. In Northern Ireland, the refreshed Protect Life strategy includes a new objective to develop and implement internet guidelines which seek to both restrict the promotion of suicide and self-harm to encourage the circulation of positive mental health messages. Online risks must be managed more effectively, and advertisements with hyperlinks to support services must be displayed whenever users discuss or search for information about harmful behaviour if we are to ensure that people in distress can access useful resources quickly. I acknowledge that the Byron Review calls for a shared culture of resilience with families, industry, government and others in the public and third sector, all playing their part to reduce the availability of potential harm material, restrict access to it by children and to increase children's resilience. There needs to be a greater understanding of how young people use modern technologies and communications if they are to be engaged in relation to suicide awareness and prevention and mental health and well-being. In conclusion, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the causes of suicide are multiple and complex. They cannot be addressed by any one government department working in isolation. Recent years have seen a commitment by government to deliver suicide prevention strategies throughout the United Kingdom, but these must be adequately resourced on a sustainable basis if the progress already made is to be maintained. While we must acknowledge the good work already taking place, there is, of course, always room for improvement, and I believe that efforts must be concentrated on making the internet a safer place for our young people. I recognise that this is a particularly complex matter, and the challenges it presents are indeed multiple. Nonetheless, they are challenges that must be overcome, for children have the right to be protected from all forms of abuse, violence and harm. Enhanced internet safety is only part of the solution to the growing problem of suicide and self-harm. Through a coordinated approach, we must effectively address the issues impacting on emotional health so that we reach a point where so-called suicide sites will no longer be attractive to vulnerable individuals, making them naturally obsolete and unattractive to view. We need to think innovatively about what more can we do across government and the community to reduce the rate of suicide in the United Kingdom. Mr. Speaker, or Mr. Deputy Speaker, as I conclude, I trust that my right honourable and honourable friends will not only deal with the issues which I have touched on, but the families of those that have experienced suicide, because they also need help. I'm happy to go on.
Well, I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving way, and I congratulate him on the speech that he's making this afternoon in leading this debate, but also on the tremendous work he's doing to highlight this issue here in the House. He's mentioned the refreshed Protect Life strategy, and it's good to know that that strategy is developing under devolution. He may just about remember I was the Minister for Health at the time who launched that in 2006. And just on the point he's making, can I just emphasise and ask him to emphasise how important it is that the families of those with direct experience are at the core of that strategy, because they better understand the issues at stake and can inform all of us about the best way forward.
Just helpful to the Chamber, we are meant to speak through the Chair, not to the member concerned. I know members have not been on the back benches for a while, but we're now back into the swing of being in opposition, and hopefully we can learn to come through the Chair. Reverend William McCrea.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I concur with the remarks that the right honourable gentleman has made, because I can say honestly, no better person to bring this or introduce it at the beginning than himself. He certainly has done sterling work on this. We deeply in Northern Ireland appreciate the work that he did, but we do want to carry that forward, and we wanted to take it to the next step. And therefore, families in their grief, in their bewilderment, in their loss, they needed to be treated and to be at the very heart of whatever next step is taken. The emphasis on suicide prevention must remain, for as the Stamp Out Suicide website plainly notes, once a suicide is completed, very sadly, there is no cure. That's right. I beg to move.